The first snow of the season fell soft over Pine Ridge, Montana, covering the valley in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. But nothing about Daniel Mercer's life felt clean or new anymore. At 43, he lived alone in a small cabin at the edge of the forest, a place most people drove past without a second glance. His truck was 15 years old, his clothes were worn, and his hands were permanently stained from years of working odd jobs around town. Daniel had moved to Pine Ridge 7 years ago after his construction company went bankrupt in Denver. The divorce came next, then the sale of the house, and finally the quiet retreat to this forgotten corner of Montana where land was cheap and questions were few. He bought the cabin with what little money remained and took work wherever he could find it, repairing fences, splitting firewood, clearing brush. It was honest work, but it was lonely work. His nearest neighbors were the Pritchards, a wealthy family from California who had built what they called a mountain retreat but what everyone else called a mansion. Robert Pritchard was a tech entrepreneur who wore expensive outdoor gear that had never seen actual outdoor use. His wife, Vanessa, drove a white Range Rover that always looked freshly washed, even on muddy spring days. Their son, Kyle, was 22 and treated Pine Ridge like his personal playground. The Pritchards had arrived 2 years ago with big plans and bigger attitudes. They hired local contractors to build their dream home, then complained about everything from the speed of rural internet to the lack of organic grocery options. But they stayed, mostly during summers and ski season, treating the locals like background characters in their Montana adventure. Daniel tried to keep to himself, but geography made that difficult. His cabin sat on a dirt road that wound through the pines, and the Pritchards' property was just a quarter-mile down the same path. Every time they drove past his place, he could feel their judgment. His small cabin with its patched roof and firewood stacked outside was everything they had left the city to avoid seeing. The mockery started in October, just as Daniel was preparing for winter. He had spent 2 full days digging a path from his cabin door to the main road, but he had made it narrow, just wide enough for him to walk through comfortably, maybe 3 feet across. He dug it deep and straight, piling the excess dirt high on both sides to create walls. Kyle Pritchard was the first to comment. He had driven by in his lifted Jeep and stopped, window down, a smirk on his face. "Hey, Mercer, what's with the trail? Practicing for a tightrope walk?" Daniel had looked up from his work, shovel in hand, sweat on his brow despite the cold air. "Just getting ready for winter," he said simply. Kyle had laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the trees. "Man, you know it snows here, right? Like a lot? That tiny path is gonna disappear the first time we get a real storm. You should see our driveway. Dad had it designed by a landscape architect. Wide heated, the whole deal. But hey, you do you." Daniel had said nothing, just returned to his digging. He knew what people thought of him. The broke guy, the failure from Denver, the one who couldn't even afford to heat his driveway like normal rich people. Word spread quickly in a small town. Within days, Daniel's narrow path had become a local joke. At the hardware store, someone asked if he was trying to save money on shovel work. At the diner, a group of contractors chuckled about it over coffee. Even Margaret, the kind elderly woman who ran the post office, had gently suggested he might want to widen it before the heavy snows came. But Daniel knew something they didn't. He had grown up in northern Minnesota, where winters were brutal and unforgiving. His grandfather had taught him how to read the land, how to work with nature instead of against it. A narrow path with high walls created a wind tunnel that swept snow clear. A wide path collected it, letting the wind drop its load evenly across the surface. The Pritchards had spent thousands on their wide, heated driveway. They had hired a crew to create walking paths that were 6 feet wide, lined with decorative stones and LED lighting. Vanessa had posted photos on social media with captions about their rustic Montana lifestyle. Daniel finished his path in silence, ignoring the comments and the stares. He stacked the dirt walls higher, packed them firm, and angled them slightly to catch the prevailing wind. When he was done, he stood back and surveyed his work. It looked rough, simple, maybe even primitive compared to the Pritchards' professional landscaping. But he knew the truth. Winter in Montana was coming, and it would be the ultimate judge. November brought the first real storm. 6 inches fell overnight, and by morning the town was transformed into a winter postcard. Daniel woke early, made coffee, and looked out his window. His narrow path was completely clear, just as he had known it would be. The wind had funneled through the tight corridor, sweeping the snow to either side where it piled against his carefully constructed walls. He pulled on his boots and jacket and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The path stretched before him like a dark ribbon cutting through white, perfectly walkable, not a shovel needed. Down the road, he could hear the sound of machinery. The Pritchards were already up, and from the noise, they were having trouble. Daniel grabbed his shovel anyway and started his morning routine, clearing the small area around his truck. An hour later, Cal Pritchard came walking up the road, his expensive boots crunching through 8 inches of fresh snow. His face was red from cold and frustration. When he saw Daniel's clear path, he stopped dead. "You've got to be kidding me," Cal said, his voice sharp with disbelief. "How is your path clear?" Daniel leaned on his shovel. "Wind does the work." Kyle stared at the narrow corridor, then back at his own property where their wide, beautiful driveway was buried under snow. The heating system had malfunctioned during the night, and now they were stuck. "Our driveway is completely covered. Dad's already called the plow service, but they're backed up for hours. Everyone's calling them." Daniel nodded but said nothing. He had learned long ago that some people needed to figure things out on their own. "This doesn't make sense," Kyle continued, walking closer to examine the path. "This thing is like 3 feet wide. It should be buried. Our driveway is state-of-the-art." "Different approach," Daniel said simply. "Narrow and high beats wide and low in snow country." Kyle's jaw tightened. The mockery he had delivered so easily in October was now turning back on him. He looked at Daniel's simple cabin, the smoke rising from the chimney, the clear path leading to the road, and something shifted in his expression. It was not quite respect, but it was close to recognition. "Well," Kyle said, his voice lacking its usual confidence, "I guess you knew what you were doing." Before Daniel could respond, Robert Pritchard's voice boomed from down the road. "Kyle, where are you? We need help with the generator." Kyle turned and trudged back through the deep snow, his designer boots sinking with each step. Daniel watched him go, then returned to his coffee and his quiet morning. The storm was just beginning. The real test was still ahead. December arrived with a vengeance. 3 major storms hit Pine Ridge in 2 weeks, each one dumping more snow than the last. The town struggled to keep up. Plow services were overwhelmed, prices skyrocketed, and tempers grew short as driveways disappeared under feet of accumulation. Daniel's narrow path remained clear through every storm. Each morning he would wake to find it swept clean by the same wind patterns he had anticipated. His walls grew higher with each snowfall as the wind deposited its load on either side, creating a canyon that grew deeper and more impressive with time. The Pritchards were not faring well. Their heated driveway had failed completely after the second storm, and the repair technician could not get parts until spring. They were now paying premium rates for emergency plowing twice a day, and even then, the wide expanse collected snow faster than it could be cleared. Their decorative walking paths had vanished entirely under white drifts. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Daniel was inside reading when he heard frantic knocking on his door. He opened it to find Vanessa Pritchard standing there, her expensive coat dusted with snow, her face pale with worry. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "I need help. Robert had a fall on our driveway. He twisted his ankle badly. The ambulance cannot get down our road. Too much snow. They are waiting at the main highway." Daniel did not hesitate. He grabbed his coat and followed her out into the night. The snow was falling heavily, visibility poor, but his path cut through the storm like a tunnel. They moved quickly, Vanessa struggling to keep up in her inappropriate footwear. When they reached the Pritchard property, Robert was sitting on their front steps, his face twisted in pain, Cal hovering uselessly beside him. Daniel assessed the situation quickly. The ambulance was a quarter-mile away on the main road. The Pritchards' wide driveway was impassable, drifted over with 3 feet of fresh powder. "We need to get him to the road," Daniel said. "Can you walk at all?" Robert shook his head. "I don't think so. It's bad." Daniel looked at Kyle. Your Jeep running? Yeah, but it cannot get through this snow. We are stuck. Daniel thought for a moment, then made a decision. We use my path. It connects to the logging trail that runs parallel to the main road. Narrower, but it's clear. We can get him there on foot with support. If you are watching this and rooting for Daniel like we are, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. This story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming, and you will not want to miss what happens next. They worked together, Robert between Daniel and Kyle, moving slowly but steadily through Daniel's narrow corridor. The walls blocked the wind, the path stayed clear, and 20 minutes later they reached the ambulance. The word spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Daniel Mercer had saved Robert Pritchard using the same narrow path everyone had mocked. By Monday morning, Daniel's phone was ringing constantly. Neighbors who had laughed at his design now wanted advice. How did he build those walls? What angle caught the wind best? Could he help them redesign their driveways before the next storm? Daniel found himself in an unexpected position. People were listening to him again, respecting his knowledge, seeking his guidance. It felt strange after 7 years of being invisible, of being the broke guy from Denver who didn't know anything. The Pritchards came to his door on Tuesday. All three of them, looking humbled in a way Daniel had never seen. Robert was on crutches, his ankle wrapped, but he had insisted on making the walk through Daniel's path to get there. We owe you an apology, Robert said, his voice sincere. We came here thinking we knew better than everyone. Spent a fortune trying to impose our ideas on land we didn't understand. You tried to work with nature and we tried to dominate it. I was wrong. Vanessa nodded. We have been horrible neighbors. Judgmental, dismissive. You saved my husband's life using the very thing we mocked. Kyle stepped forward, his usual arrogance gone. I was the worst, he said quietly. I made jokes. Called you names behind your back. Thought you were just some washed-up guy who did not know what he was doing. I am sorry. Daniel stood in his doorway, these three people who had made him feel small now standing before him asking for forgiveness. He could have held onto his anger, could have reminded them of every cutting comment and dismissive look. But he knew what it felt like to lose everything and have to start over. He knew what rock bottom looked like. Apology accepted, Daniel said simply. Winter is hard on everyone. We all do what we can to survive it. Robert shifted on his crutches. I want to hire you. We are redesigning our entire property for next winter. Narrow paths, wind walls, the whole approach. And I want you to consult for our company. We develop mountain properties across the West. We need someone who actually understands this environment. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not quite hope, but something close to it. A door opening after years of being closed. I would need to think about it, Daniel said. Of course, Robert replied. But Daniel, you have knowledge people need. Real knowledge. The kind you cannot buy with money or read in a book. You learned it the hard way, and that makes it valuable. The Pritchards left, walking carefully back through the narrow path that had changed everything. Daniel stood watching them go, smoke from his chimney rising into the cold Montana sky. January brought clarity along with the cold. Daniel accepted Robert's offer, but on his own terms. He would consult on mountain property design, teaching others what his grandfather had taught him about working with the land instead of against it. But he would stay in Pine Ridge, in his small cabin, living the life he had built from the pieces of his broken past. The work came slowly at first, then all at once. Robert's company sent him to properties in Wyoming, Idaho, and Colorado. Wealthy landowners who had made the same mistakes as the Pritchards, spending fortunes on elaborate systems that failed when nature pushed back. Daniel walked their land, read the wind patterns, studied the treelines and slopes. He taught them about snow fences, strategic path placement, and the old wisdom that had kept his grandfather's farm accessible through Minnesota's worst winters. The money was good, better than anything he had earned since Denver. But more than the money, it was the respect that healed something deep inside him. People listened when he spoke. They valued his opinion. They stopped seeing a failure and started seeing an expert. Back in Pine Ridge, things changed too. The town council asked him to redesign the Main Street snow management system. The elementary school hired him to create safe walking paths for students. Even Margaret at the post office requested help with her driveway, though hers was more about wanting to spend time with him than needing the assistance. The Pritchards became genuine friends, the kind born from shared hardship and mutual respect. Kyle started working with Daniel on projects, learning the craft, shedding his arrogance like an old coat that no longer fit. Vanessa invited Daniel to dinners where they talked about everything except money and status. Robert sent him clients and sang his praises to anyone who would listen. In February, Daniel received a call from his ex-wife, Jennifer. She had heard about his success through mutual friends still in Denver. Her voice was cautious, probing, asking if the rumors were true. Was he really consulting for a major development company? Was he really doing well? I am, Daniel said simply. Different than before, but good. There was a long pause. I always knew you had it in you, she said finally. I just wish we could have made it through the hard part together. Daniel looked out his window at the narrow path that had changed everything, at the walls of snow standing tall and proud. We were not meant to, Jen. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you are really made of. They talked for a few more minutes, cordial but distant, two people who had shared a life but were no longer meant to share a future. When he hung up, Daniel felt only peace. No regret, no anger, just acceptance. Spring was coming. The snow would melt, the paths would disappear, and the cycle would begin again. But Daniel would be ready. He always was. 3 years later, Daniel stood on a ridge overlooking a new development in Aspen, Colorado. The project was his design from foundation to finish, a community of luxury cabins built to work with the mountain instead of fighting it. Narrow paths wound between the homes, their walls engineered to catch the wind just right. Native plants lined the corridors, and the whole place had an organic feel that wealthy buyers were paying premium prices to experience. His company, Mercer Mountain Design, now employed 12 people, including Kyle Pritchard as a junior consultant. What had started as a single project with Robert had grown into something Daniel never imagined possible. He designed communities across the Rockies, taught workshops on sustainable mountain living, and had been featured in Architectural Digest as a pioneer of adaptive alpine design. But every winter he returned to Pine Ridge, to his small cabin with the patched roof and the narrow path that had started everything. He had offers to sell, developers waving money at him for the land, but he always said no. This place had saved him when he had nothing left. It had taught him that sometimes the simplest solution was the right one, that nature rewarded those who paid attention, and that real strength came from understanding your limitations and working within them. Margaret from the post office had become more than a friend. She sat on his porch now on summer evenings, sharing stories about the town and laughing at how much had changed. The Pritchards visited every season, their mansion now equipped with Daniel's designs, their attitudes transformed by 3 winters of humility. The town had changed too. Pine Ridge was no longer just a place where wealthy outsiders came to play in the mountains. It had become a model for sustainable mountain living, with Daniel's principles incorporated into the town planning. Tourists came to see the famous narrow paths, to learn about wind dynamics and snow management, to understand how one man's mocked idea had revolutionized an entire approach to alpine development. Daniel's grandfather would have been proud, not of the money or the recognition, but of the fact that his grandson had listened, had remembered, had passed on the old wisdom to a new generation that desperately needed it. On quiet mornings, Daniel still walked his original path, now maintained more for memory than necessity. He ran his hand along the packed earth walls, feeling the years of wind and weather compressed into their surface. This narrow corridor had been his salvation, his vindication, and his rebirth. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it moved you, hit that like button and leave a comment below. What challenges have you faced that others did not understand? Subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience, redemption, and unexpected triumph. And let us know what kind of story you would like to hear next. Sometimes the path less traveled, the one others mock and dismiss, is exactly the one that leads you home.